here we go. Well done. So, right, Devarim. So let's just see what we want to start with. The beginning of the parsha. The beginning of the parsha. There are distinctions. There are distinctions between Parshas Devarim and Parshas Yisro. Ostensibly, it looks the same. But in fact, if you look carefully, there's actually significant differences between what Moshe Rabbeinu does and what Yisro does in terms of the appointment of the judges. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a second. But let's first understand a more general perspective, which is also relevant, obviously, to the time of year. There is a din in brought down. It still seems to be in the Machzor Vitri originally. Machzor Vitri says, "Mefarzerin haparshas kadesh nikres ela hadvorim l'Shabbos lifnei Tisha B'av." You split up the parshas so that, or you organize the parshas in such a way so that ela hadvorim, Parshas Devarim, is always the Shabbos before Tisha B'av. Right? We mentioned this last Shabbos. This is why we've now caught up. Everyone's on the same page. Parshas Devarim is always the Shabbos before Tisha B'av. Kadesh yikru es eicha es solavadi, and the reason is because, says the Machzor Vitri, so the eicha es solavadi should be read before, specifically before Tisha B'av. Now, eicha and eicha, right? Obviously, right? But there must be something more to it than that. And I saw a beautiful pshat from someone called. He puts this together, some Rabbi Yaakov Grunstein, or Rabbi Shur Grunstein, I think. He says like this: you actually find the concept of Eicha Esol Avadi, right, twice in the Torah. Not exactly the same words, but almost the same words, right? Moshe Rabbeinu says, "How can I possibly bear this people alone?" And then from there we come on to the concept of the Shoftim, which we'll come back to. The Shoftim, the idea of the division of labor and everything else, right? But the other place you find is in Parshas Baloscha, when Moshe Rabbeinu, when they rebel and they ask for things and everything else, go back to Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Lo yochal onochi levadi lo seisis kol hamazeh ki choveid mimeni." It's almost exactly the same words. Lo yochal eicha esol levadi, and there it says, "Lo yochal onochi levadi lo seis." Right? It's almost exactly the same. And in other words, what is Moshe Rabbeinu saying there? He explains what he's saying. Right? Here it just says, "Eicha esol levadi." I can't carry torachem masachem v'rivchem. How your burdens, your stress, all your problems. There he says, "Ki choveid mimeni." It's too much for me. It's too difficult for me. There are two different approaches. To Eicha in this parsha. How we lane Eicha, minhagim. Two different minhagim. Eishel Avram brings down, important Eishel Avram, Hakuri, Kfal Apostle Shlifnei Posuk Eicha, Hakuri, Kfal Apostle Shlifnei Posuk Eicha Esolavadi. He talks about doubling the posuk. We don't actually double the posuk, we simply stop a posuk early. Chasidish meaning what, to double the posuk, to repeat it. Very interesting. So you finish in the right place and then go back. Okay, like we do on Rosh Chodesh. Here we don't do that. We finish a posuk early, Rishon, and then Sheni we begin from Eicha. We bring into the posuk before Eicha, right? Why? Why is it that the Koreh doubles that posuk? Because shemanagnin Eicha ke'Eicha the Megillah. Because since we lay in Eicha like the Eicha of the Megillah. Therefore, we don't want to start with that, so we start a posuk before. The Piskei Teshuvos though brings down other minhagim. He says noagim rabim she'ein meshanim klal be'esnag shabazu. There are many who have the minhag not to change at all in the Kriyas HaTorah in any way this Shabbos, and they sing a regular l'chododi. I think we do regular l'chododi. We don't do we're not the right. Ve'ein omrim posuk eicha solavadi v'nigun eicha. There are some who don't lay eicha solavadi with the nigun of eicha. They don't bring that into Shabbos in that way. It's interesting whether to also the Haftarah presumably as well. There'll be others who I think will hold the same way about the Haftarah, I imagine, right? So the idea is like this. Suggests Rabbi Grunstein like this. He says that what's the difference between the two minhagim? There's a difference in how you read this pasuk. What is going on here? When Moshe Rabbeinu says Eicha esol levadi, on the one hand you can read it like the pasuk in Parshas Baloscha. Ki choved mimeni, I can't manage, I cannot bear it. Ki cho is too much for me. The burden is too difficult, right? Which is in a sense a negative thing, in the sense that I cannot do this alone. I need, so it's too much for me, it's too difficult, right? but it can also be read in a more positive way. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, you need people to help. We need people. I need people to help. In other words, it's not that it's a negative reflection, as in it's too much, I can't cope, but it's a positive in the sense that now is the time to bring in other people. Eicha Esolavadi is a sense of, okay, I know that I can't manage, and therefore I'm going to bring in other people. Therefore, I'm going to understand the importance of division of labor, bring in other people together. And he suggests that's the difference between the two minhagim. The minhag to lane it with the nigun of eicha means it's a crux, like eicha, right? Eicha is sort of, how can it be? How can it be? This is too difficult for me. How can it possibly be they're behaving in this way? Eicha is sort of that you lane without the nigun of eicha is not a negative. It's a sense of, I now need others. I realize I can't do this alone. He brings the Ramah says that the minhag is to say after the end of Shemona Esra, the Hirotz and Shibona Beis Hamikdash Meherav Yomeinu, and then we say the words V'sein Chalkeinu B'Sarasecha. So it's an interesting thing, right? Yeah. Why do we say V'sein Chalkeinu B'Sarasecha? Yeah. What has that got to do with the Shibona Beis Hamikdash? Fair question. What? Right. There's a lot of tefillah like that, right? Said all the time. What's it going to do with this? Those are two things, right? The answer is that the key to Yibona Beis Hamikdash is Sen Chalkeinu B'Sarasach, is understanding that we each have our own chelek to play. But Sen Chalkeinu B'Sarasach, give us our chelek in your Torah, and that's how we'll build the Beis Hamikdash. If we each understand that we each fulfill the role that we have, there is a division of labor, there is a division of tasks, there is not a there's not one person trying to carry everything alone, but each member of Klal Yisrael fulfills their individual and unique role. Then you get to the Yibona Beis Hamikdash Meherav Yomeinu, right? But it has to be understood, he says, as a chiyuv, something that is an obligation. It's not something that is just optional. It brings us a final sort of reflection of this idea, just a beautiful thought that in at the end of Parshas Shmos. At the end of Parshas Shmos, Parshas Pekudei, you find the counting, right? Kol hazov v'osu l'malacha v'chol melechas hakodesh, and it lists the Zahava Tnufa was Tesha v'esrim kikar. It lists how much gold there was, and then it says Vahimas kar kesef l'tzekas yodnei hakodesh. And then it says how much silver there was, and what was the ma'as kikar kesef? What was the silver used for? It was used to create the adonim, right? The adonim, the sockets. Ma'as adonim kikar, the ma'as kikar kikar la'adonim. Ibn Ezra says there in Parshas Pekudei, lo mahiskim ma'asu b'kesef. Why does it mention what happened with the kesef, with the silver? It doesn't mention what happened with the gold. You would think logically the Torah would tell us this is what they used the gold for, this is what they used the silver for. It doesn't say that. It doesn't mention what they did with the gold. It just says this is what they did with the silver, right? He says, Lafi Daiti says the Ibn Ezra, Shehiskim ha'osu b'kesef, Shu kesef ha'kipurim, v'nei hiskiki al kesef ha'chiyuv, ha'yomed ha'mishkan. V'zeh zekor livnei Yisrael. It says because they were obligated. It was Kesef HaKippurim, they had to bring as an atonement, they were obligated to bring this Kesef, and it was on the obligation that the Mishkan stood. The Mishkan rested on the fact that they understood that they brought something as a chiyuv, that it wasn't just like an optional donation, oh, we feel like participating in this. No, each individual person understood that it was a chiyuv, that they were mechuyev to do their bit, and that is what supported the Mishkan. That created the sockets, the Adonim. It's a beautiful idea, right? This idea of the fact that Eicha Esolavadi can be read as a negative, it can also be read as a positive. It's time to have a division of labor. And on that note, let's understand how it was, the differences between this week's parsha and the parsha of Parshas Yisro. I've heard this is an idea from Rabbi Cheskel Weinfeld, who says the following thing. He says that if you look at it on the surface, it looks like he's telling over what happened in Parshas Yisro, right? He's repeating what happened, right? But if you look carefully, there are big differences. Here it says, I said to you, I can't carry you alone. So this is in Posuk Tes, yeah, Posuk Tes. And so therefore he says, a few psukim later, therefore you need to bring, right? You need to bring the beginning of Pasuk Yud Gimel. You need to bring people who are chachomim and nevonim and yiduim and shifteichem, and they will be appointed they'll be appointed as judges, right? So here it seems that it's Moshe Rabbeinu himself feeling the problem, And he's suggesting appointing judges. It's quite strange. Quite strange. Parshas Yisro, who was the one who suggested it? Yisro, right? And he says, what are you doing? The father says, you're going to wear out. It's too much for you. You can't do it alone. Listen to me, and I'll give you advice. Why does Moshe Rabbeinu live out his father? Doesn't mention Yisro here. It's all I said to you, it's a basic question, this, right? It's a basic question on the whole parsha. Well, what is going on? Why is he not repeating it as it happened? Secondly, the other problem is that the requirements differ of what these people need to be. In Yisro, they're described as they have to be Yirei Elokim, Anshe Emes, Sonei Botza. What does that mean? They have to be people who are Fear Hashem. They have to detest bribery. They have to be honest, truthful, faithful, right? Yeah? This is about character, not about your intellect. It's all about character, right? The qualities, yeah? What does Moshe Rabbeinu say? Chachomim, wise, and Nevonim, Rashi says they understand, Novon is someone who understands Dova mitoich Dova, can understand one thing from another. Okay. And Viduim and known to your Shvotim, these are intellectual qualities. They're not character. It doesn't say character. It doesn't say qualities based on character. There's a big difference, right? Okay. And finally, the other difference is in Parshas Yisro, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yisro says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you should be the one to choose. Moshe's advice is, you find the Anshe Chayil. You find the people who are worthy of this, Kim, etc., etc. In Devarim, what does it say? Havu lochem. He says to the people, you do it. Havu lochem. You elect the judges. You bring these people. Havu lochem anoshim chafomim v'nevonim. So I don't know you. These are questions which never really occurred to me before. Maybe partly because we don't really learn Devarim very well. But this is, these are basic questions. There's obviously something else going on. So he suggests bichidush. This is Rabbi Cheskel Weinfeld I quoted in the past, who was the Rav in the Shul I davened in when I was in Matashkol, a very big Talmid Chacham. He suggests like this. What? Yeah. He's a remarkable individual. Go visit him. Go in Matashkol. In Matashkol, quite possibly. Yeah. Yeah, he gives beautiful shir, very deep and insightful. Yeah. He's American originally. He's lived in Israel for many, many years. He says like this. He suggests that actually there are two different things going on. Two different things. The appointment of judges that Yisro suggests is different, right? He was talking about appointing judges. The judges have to have the character of Yirei Elokim, Sonei Botza, right? They have to have detesting bribery. They're judges, they're shoftim, right? Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about leadership. Leaders, not the same. That's not the same as judges. They need to have a high intellectual capacity to be in a position of leadership. Moshe Rabbeinu does the following thing. According to this, he sees Yisro's advice about shoftim, about judges, and he internalizes it and takes it further. He builds on it. It's something different. He realizes that it's not just about the judges that he can't do alone, but he can't lead alone either. It's not just, the judges aren't leading, they're judging, right? That's one aspect of leadership, but he realizes that he cannot lead alone. And therefore he decides on his own accord to appoint leaders. And that's why here he doesn't mention Yisro, because it's not Yisro. Yisro was something else, right? He learned from Yisro to talk about leaders in general. And why is it that when it came to the shoftim, the leaders are appointed by Moshe Rabbeinu, whereas here the leaders are elected by the people, right? And that's because the only way you can have true leaders are leaders that the people accept and want. It's not the same as a judicial system. You can have an appointment system. When it comes to leadership, if the people don't want them, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to work, right? And that's also why when it came to the judges, the emphasis on character. Leaders is not enough. To be a leader, you can't just be a nice and kind person. You have to be a leader. You have to be a leader. You have to be a chachomim and nevonim. There's no point of appointing a leader who's not willing to, how should we put it, have tough conversations, right? No, of course you do. For sure. Obviously, it's a fair question in the sense that, obviously you have to also be a sinner. I would say like this, for a judge who is dealing with parties and monetary cases and everything else, Sonei Botza is the bread and butter. What are you going to focus on first? The first is make sure he's a Sonei Botza, because if he doesn't hate bribery, he's finished as a shofet. A leader is a wide range of qualities. Within that, of course, a leader susceptible to bribery is a disaster. But you would also agree that it's not enough just to be unsusceptible to bribery. Someone who's unsusceptible to bribery alone, it could be because he's just a genuinely a fantastic, warm, kind-hearted person. And that person is not necessarily a good leader, right? They can be a good judge, but not, to be a leader, you have to have vision, and you have to have understanding, and you have to have tough conversations. It's not enough. You have to be chachamim and avim. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea, right? And that is different, and that is what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing here. He also shared another idea that that in the Sefer Chochmah Musaf in the Altar of Kelm, and it's interesting. He said also another idea. Apparently, Ches Av, which is tonight and tomorrow, is the yahrzeit of the altar from Kelm, right? And in Kelm, apparently, he said this minhag. There was a minhag that a Yosem would not daven at the Omid. They would not daven at the Omid. Okay, and they said the reason is because the Amud is not a Yosem. You don't look at the Amud as a Yosem. It's not how it works. It's not what the Amud is. Just a nice, interesting perspective. I think it means that it has to be something which is it's almost like a message. Don't look. I suppose don't take the Omid just alone the Omid is not an orphan from the rest of the killer. Perhaps that was the meaning. Anyway, he says like this. Alter Kelm says that Moshe Rabbeinu talks about appointing judges, shoftim, and again we said that this seems to be connected to Yisro. Why was it that Moshe Rabbeinu? We said as we explained just now that the point of the whole message is that Yisro talks about appointing the shoftim, the judges. Moshe Rabbeinu takes it from there and talks about leadership, and learns from that in terms of leadership in general. How is it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu, who does so much and is so intuitive and is so attuned to Bnei Yisrael, takes us out Mitzrayim, everything else, Kriyas Yam, and yet he is he needs Yisro to tell him that you have to deal with how to work the judicial process. It seems like something which he should have worked out himself. Rashi says, "Shehuksha hadover liyisroi she'mezalzel l'chvodan shel Yisrael v'yechicha al kach." It was difficult to Yisro. I think this is Rashi in Parshas Yisro, that he reduced, cheapened, if you like, the kavod of the Bnei Yisrael, and rebuked him. He rebuked him on account of that. Says the Alter from Kelm that perhaps the answer is that it was in order to give Moshe Rabbeinu an opportunity to teach us that even leaders, even great people, can have blind spots. You can be the greatest leader, right? And you can still have a blind spot. You can still miss something. You can still not realize what other people who are far lesser stature catch on to, realize, notice. And that's why perhaps the message of the Torah is sending us by this entire episode, that link between both Parshas Yisro specific to the Shoftim and here in leadership in general, is saying you can be the greatest leader, but you will still have a blind spot. There'll be something that someone who you think, well, you need to ask for advice. You need to ask for advice. And don't be afraid of taking that advice from you perceive to be of a far lower stature. Sometimes they will notice something which you haven't noticed. Yeah, exactly. As in talking about consulting. That's right. Exactly. Absolutely. I don't think that's right. That's exactly the message there. 100%. Yeah. Okay. So just a few other ideas and what we have time for. What is the idea of the? He says, "Hinchem hayom kechoch ve'hashamayim." You are like the koch ve'hashamayim, right? So this is also before, just around the same part of the parsha. He says, this is also, that's right, Pasuk Yud. Hashem Elokeichem, I said to you that time, I can't carry bear you alone. Hashem Elokeichem, what is the significance? What is the significance of the fact that he says you are like Koch ve'hashamayim? Like the side Rashi asked the question as well, because it's a bit difficult to understand. They weren't like the stars then. They were only 600,000. What does it mean, V'nechem hayom? You are today, Koch ve'hashamayim. So Rashi says, you're compared to the day, you will be here forever, just like the sun and the moon and the stars will be here forever. So Reb Menachem Tzion Zaks, in his Sefer Menachem Tzion, he says like this. He says that there is an issue with the concept of stars. What does a star imply? A star implies some standing out. That's when you're a star. You're standing out, right? In Hebrew, it's hitstainut. You're stylish, you're exceptional, you're wonderful, right? Moshe Rabbeinu says, you are kekochvei hashamayim, like the stars of Shemayim, lo roiv, in the greatness that you have, right? Like, it's not just about number, numerical, but in greatness as well. Okay, you stand out, like it says in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, right? They were vayishom lagoy malamed sheho Yisrael mitzuyanim shom. They stood out. They were mitzuyan. They were excellent. They were wonderful. That's what mitzvah means, right? Stand out. Okay. But Moshe Rabbeinu adds something else here. It says the next pasuk says Hashem Elokeinu v'seichem yosef aleichem kolchem elef pa'omim. He should add on to you 1,000th time, right? And he should give you a brivorech Hashem and bless you kasher debelachem as he's spoken to you. And the message here, he says, it suggests is like this: it's not enough for you to be just incredible individually as stars. A star is a world in of itself. That's what a star is. Olam b'fnei atzmo. The bracha Moshe Rabbeinu gives to them is that Hashem will be mosif on you, will increase and give you a bracha, which is not comparable to stars. What is the bracha to add on to you? What does it mean, Yosef Aleichem? That is the bracha which he gave to Avraham Avinu, like the sand. The stars alone are not good enough. You have to be like the stars, but also like the sand as well. It has to be a combination. What is that combination? Stars imply you stand out. Each one is special. Everyone is an olam b'fnei atzmo. That's the nature of stars. The nature of sand is the idea that you can't even measure. The grains themselves are too small. They're basically irrelevant in and of themselves. They are only relevant. They are only important when they bind together, when they come together as one. So therefore, the message he was saying to them is, yes, you should be individual, you should be important, you should be significant, you should be kekochvei hashamayim, but it's not going to be good enough. That's not enough. Hashem Elokeinu v'seichem yosef aleichem kasher dibelochem, as he spoke to you, to increase you like the chol hayom, like the sand, in the sense that you come together as well. You don't just work alone, but you come together, which fits very nicely with the whole continuation in the sense of the idea of not bearing it alone, not carrying this burden by yourself. And finally, one final idea is the Netziv, the Hamek Dover, right? Much further on, Perek Daled Posuk Aleph. So we say we haven't just stood on the first. Well, this is actually the next week's parsha, which is fine because there's no share next week. So I want to share this with you anyway. That's right. This is just in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. It's an idea on Leman Tichyu, right? This is in the this is the idea about Toras Chaim Parshas. The truth is, it's all one piece anyway. Meaning, the whole of Devarim through voice, it's all one speech. It's all one speech. It all fits together. What does it mean when it says Leman Tichyu? Listen to the Chukim Mishpatim Shonechim Alamed Eschem La'asos that I teach you to do Leman Tichyu, in order that you live with Vosem and you inherit Eretz Yisrael. What does it mean in order to live? So he says that the Hamek Dover says that Ibn Ezra says that it means Ki Ovdei Pa'ar Nishmadu. He says those who worship Pa'ar were destroyed. And you don't want to be like them, so you should live, right? You should live, right? And he says it's very difficult to understand because what has it got to do with Baal Pa'ar? And not everyone who worshipped Baal Pa'ar was destroyed. At least and in other words, the non-Jews who worship Baal Pa'ar, they weren't all destroyed. So what does that mean? Yeah, and he says that the idea is that every sensitivity that we have in Ruchnius, he says, gives us greater strength. It increases us and gives us greater chiyus. It gives us greater life, a sense of living, a sense of being alive. If a person, if a person's sense of and feeling of being alive is dependent on their sensitivity towards the ruchnius in life, towards spiritual sensitivity. If you have that sensitivity, you essentially live a fuller life, a life that is in color, that is more realized, that has more potential. He says, he senses and feels a sense of being alive from that avodah, from that serving of Hashem. Umimi Yisrael shema'abed hargoshani imozu nikromes. And someone who doesn't have that sensitivity towards that spiritual sensitivity, that is as if that person is no longer alive. And he says that that therefore that is what it means that someone who has been able to achieve and connect to the chukim and the mishpatim in the correct way, someone who has been able to ascend those levels, to feel that sensitivity, to feel that connection to Hashem, he actually becomes more alive than someone who is not able to sense that, to feel that sensitivity. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to convey here the idea that it's not just a sense of you need to do this because, and as we said, this week's parsha is really building up to this, because that's what Voschanan does. Voschanan builds on Devarim, right? The Devarim is the Teichacha, is the rebuke, which leads you to, okay, and therefore what's the point? And the point is, Voschanan, Yaser Sadibras, Shema Yisrael, keep the Torah mitzvahs. But the sense of why we do it is not only because we are told to do it, but it brings us to live life to a fuller extent. Leman Tichyu means that you will live better. You will live better if you can live a life which is attuned to the sensitivity of spirituality and is connected to the ideals of the Torah itself. And therefore, the message he wants to tell us is, you can live life on two different planes. You can live life on a plane that exists entirely in this world, and then your life essentially is a life of black and white, because it doesn't have a richness to it, doesn't have a depth to it. If you want to live life on a higher plane, live life for higher ideals. Live life reaching for something more meaningful, something more spiritual. That connection brings you chiyus. It brings you to life. And I think several of you, at least, were with us, in Poland. I think we saw that very powerfully, from that survivor, the Barbara, who was with us. She hadn't really experienced it on that level, and it brought her to life. It was incredible, being and feeling that Shabbos with Mahogany. It was simple. We didn't do it. No one did anything, right? But it brings you to life. It brings life. That's what it does. It brings life. It brings joy, and that's something which has to be the focus. Even though you go through the parsha of Teichacha in this week's parsha, ultimately the aim is what follows next week. So no, he disagrees with Ibn Ezra. He does. He says he feels Ibn Ezra very difficult to understand. Therefore, he suggests this instead. Ibn Ezra is very difficult to understand. Why is it the Ov de Par? What has it got to do with that? He maybe he's talking about the base nature of idolatry, of Avodah Zarah. Therefore, they don't live. Literally, they don't live. This idea. But he wants to focuses on the ruchnius, on the spiritual element. So, Emir Hashem, the next share is in 4 weeks' time. Parshas Ki Seitzei. Wish you all a very good Shabbos, Tzom Kal, and enjoy the holidays.